3 years ago, when Russia launched its invasion of Ukraine, many believed its collapse was imminent. Within weeks, the ruble had lost nearly 30% of its value and inflation soared to 18%. The world watched, expecting Russia's fragile economy to crumble under the weight of sanctions and global condemnation. But today, Russia is still standing and by some metrics even thriving. Its GDP has grown by nearly 20%, outpacing much of Europe, and inflation has stabilized at around 7%. On the surface, it seems like a story of unexpected resilience. Yet beneath that surface lies a much different reality. This isn't genuine, sustainable growth. It's a temporary high, propped up by wartime spending, oil profits, and aggressive borrowing. Dig deeper, and you'll find a country quietly burning through its future, offering $29,000 enlistment bonuses, facing worker shortages across industries, and watching its population steadily shrink. So the question remains, is this resilience or are we witnessing a slow-motion collapse? Russia. A nation caught between two worlds. Russia defies simple economic categories. It boasts the second highest rate of university-level education, one of the most powerful militaries, and the world's second largest nuclear arsenal. And yet much of its economy still functions like a developing, resource-dependent state. About 25% of the workforce is in heavy industry, mining, oil, and gas, and the average annual income hovers below $14,000, roughly one-third the EU average. To understand how Russia weathered unprecedented sanctions, we must revisit its post-Soviet past. Chaos and salvation. The 1990s. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, Russia fell into economic freefall. In 1992, inflation hit a staggering 2,250%, making everyday life nearly impossible. People carried bricks of cash to buy bread or burned rubles for warmth. Life expectancy dropped from 64 to 57 in just 4 years. Amid this chaos, oil became Russia's saving grace. Though home to the world's largest natural gas reserves, the Soviet Union barely tapped into global markets. But post-collapse, the West saw an opportunity to welcome Russia into global trade networks. Oil revenues, which stood at $90 billion in the early 1990s, exploded to over $600 billion by 2008, making up a quarter of GDP. These revenues allowed Russia to modernize its military, pay off debts, and reassert itself as a global power. By 2019, fossil fuels made up nearly 60% of exports and 30% of government revenue. But this wealth came at a cost, a dangerously undiversified economy. The oil trap. With oil being so profitable, Russia had little incentive to develop other sectors like tech, manufacturing, or consumer goods. Whole regions became economically dependent on oil prices. As with Venezuela or Angola, this kind of oil dependency rarely ends well. And yet, when the 2022 invasion triggered massive sanctions, the expected collapse never came. Why? Because energy demand didn't vanish. While Europe and the US scaled back purchases, India and China increased theirs. Despite sanctions, oil revenues remained stable, keeping the economy afloat. As of 2024, oil alone accounts for 30% of government income and 20% of GDP. This one sector is the cornerstone of Russia's economic survival. War economics. Russia's new engine. But oil alone isn't driving growth. Wartime spending has transformed Russia into a militarized economy. Military spending has climbed to 6% of GDP, nearly double the US figure. Some estimates say over a third of the federal budget now goes to the military. Enlistment bonuses as high as $29,000 are now common, more than twice the national average salary. Total spending on recruitment incentives could reach $23 billion annually. Civilian sectors are feeling the squeeze. Schools are losing teachers. Hospitals are understaffed, and midwives are forced into doctors' roles. And young men? They're disappearing. Over 160,000 were drafted from universities and jobs. Many more have been absorbed into defense factories, creating severe labor shortages. For ordinary Russians, this isn't prosperity, it's survival. Inflation may be reported at 10%, but staples like eggs and sugar have doubled. Rent in Moscow is squeezing families out of the middle class. The illusion of growth. What's happening is a textbook case of war economics. When the government becomes the economy's primary customer, funneling money into defense production, it can temporarily boost GDP and reduce unemployment. Russia's economy has grown 13% since the war began, 3 times faster than the EU average. But this is growth without value. It creates no long-term assets, no innovation, and no sustainable productivity. Once the cash runs out, the system collapses. And that moment may be approaching. Russia's national wealth fund is down to just $31 billion, the lowest since 2008. Projections suggest reserves could be depleted by fall. Hidden risks. The inflation question. Officially, Russia's inflation rate is 7%. But skepticism is rising. The central bank has raised interest rates to 16%, among the world's highest. Why would a country with 7% inflation need rates this high? Simple. The real inflation rate may be much worse. Some report rent doubling in a year. Basic groceries are selling for twice their normal price. Independent economists estimate actual inflation could range from 15% to 20%. And if inflation data is being manipulated, what about GDP? Or unemployment? Or the amount of money left in the national wealth fund? In a system where the state controls media, censors dissent, and jails critics, economic data becomes a political tool. The Kremlin's incentive to fudge numbers is enormous because confidence is the only thing keeping the system from falling apart. A house of cards? On paper, Russia is thriving, surviving sanctions, growing GDP, and projecting strength. But beneath the numbers lies a different reality: unsustainable war spending, a vanishing workforce, and possibly manipulated economic indicators. This isn't resilience. It's a balancing act, one that cannot last forever. Russia has bought time but not built a future. And eventually the bill comes due. Because no country can borrow forever. No country can fake the numbers forever. And no economy, no matter how rich in oil, can remain stable forever in a time of war.